So basically, we all know for domestic law related presumptive provisions, we will have these three presumptive provisions, namely 44 AD, 44 ADA, 44 AE. And these are allied provisions relating to that section, which we need to take it together. Reading them independently may not give full comfort, and we'll have to link also the books of account maintenance under 44 AA, audit under 44 AB, and application of few other provisions when we compute income under presumptive provisions, namely 40A, 40 small a, 40 capital A, and 43B, and section 68 or 69 related provisions on the presumptive income, some TDS and penal provisions. We may need to take it together to appreciate the law better. Now, section 44 AD, we'll get into that more time because we will have more time to devote on 44 AD. The other two will have lesser time for a discussion, and we will also have some common issues which we'll pick up for our discussion together. Now, very quickly, to just refresh the basics of this section 44 AD, who can avail this benefit of the section 44 AD? Eligible SSE engaged in eligible business. What is eligible business? Eligible business means any business except the business of flying, hiring, or leasing of goods carriages referred in 44 AE, and total turnover or gross receipt in the previous year does not exceed 2 crore rupees. That's eligible business. Who is an eligible SSE? Eligible SSE means an individual HOE of partnership other than LLP, but all being resident, not claiming any deduction under 10, 10AA, 10B, etc. And chapter 6 here relating to income, part C, heading C. Then that particular SSE will be an eligible SSE. Who will not be able to get the benefit of this section? This is what Finance Act 2012, retrospectively from Finance Act 2000, from 1st April 2011, introduced subsection 6 in 44 AD to say the provisions of this section shall not apply to a person carrying on profession referred to in 44 AA class subsection 1, and person earning income in the nature of commission or brokerage, person carrying on agency business, notwithstanding anything contained in the foregoing provisions of 44 AD. How much to offer? Equal to 8% of gross receipt or higher amount claimed to have been earned by the SSE. Only exception to that will be 6% if the money received for that gross receipt or sales in banking channel before due date under 139(1). Other conditions, namely all deduction under 30 to 38 deemed to have been given effect to in full, and no further deduction shall be allowed. Return down value of the eligible assets of the business shall be computed as if depreciation is allowed in full. If the income is not offered as contemplated therein, 8% for cash related transactions and 6% bank related transactions, what would be the consequence if income not offered as specified in subsection 1? Prior to 2017-18 assessment year, subsection 4 and 5 spoke differently. From assessment year 17-18 onwards, subsection 4 and 5 of 44 AD speaks differently. Now, conditions are very important because that throws more light into the subject. What does it say? An eligible SC declares profit in any previous year in accordance with the provisions of this section, and he declares profit for any of these 5 years relevant to the previous year, succeeding such previous year, not in accordance with the provisions of this section, subsection 1, he shall not be eligible to claim the benefit of the provisions of this section for 5 assessment years subsequent to the assessment year relevant to the previous year in which it is not so declared. Previously, up to financial year ended 31st March 16, subsection 4 said, chapter 17C relating to advance tax shall not apply for eligibility insofar as it relates to eligible business. But now new condition came from assessment year 17-18. We'll elaborate this little later. Previously, up to March 16, subsection 5 said if at all somebody doesn't offer income in accordance with subsection 1 and total income exceeds maximum amount not chargeable to tax, he shall be liable to keep and maintain books of account as per subsection 2 of 44 AA and get that audited under subsection class A or class B of subsection 44 AB. Now, assessment year 17-18 onwards, subsection 5 says eligible SC to whom provisions of subsection 4 applicable and total income exceeding basic limit shall keep and maintain books in accordance with 44AA subsection 2 and get it audited as per 44AB. Now, subsection 5 says an eligible SSC to whom provisions of subsection 4 applicable. That's what subsection 5 says. To whom does subsection 4 apply? Proceed. Now, subsection 4 says an SSC declares profit for any previous year and declares profit in any of the 5 assessment year not in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1. He shall not be eligible to claim the benefit for the 5 years subsequent to the year in which he did not declare the income in accordance with subsection 1. So the first condition is he must have declared income in accordance with 44 AD subsection 1 in 1 year. Thereafter, in 5 years' time, a block of 5 years' time, if he is not offering the income in accordance with subsection 1 in 1 year, then in the year of such walking out plus 5 more years, he cannot avail the benefit of 44 AD. That year of walking out plus 5 more years, the block of 6 years' time, subsection 4 applies for him. For that 6 years' time, subsection 5 demands for an audit under 44 AB clause E. So now, first condition is assessee must have availed the benefit under 44 AD subsection 1 in 1 year. Subsequently, in a block of 5 years' time, consecutively, any year he walks out, year of walking out plus 5 more years, he will not be able to get the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1, to which assessee 44 AD subsection 5 demands that he has to get the accounts audited under subsection under sub 44 AB clause E. That's the subtle difference came from assessment year 17-18 onwards. So first question is whether audit under 44 AB mandatory because the income from eligible business is less than 8 or 6% from assessment year 17-18. Many occasions, the difference which came in the amendment from assessment year 17-18 prior to 17-18 assessment year, post or from assessment year 17-18 onwards, this difference is very, very important for us to appreciate this controversy. Prior to that, law said if you do not offer 8 or 6%, you will have to get the accounts audited. From assessment year 17-18, law was saying differently. Previously, assessee offered income and 5 years time he is not able to offer any 1 year, in which year plus 5 more years, subsection 4 applies to him. For that person, audit is necessary provided income exceeds basic limit. So 44 AB says every person having business class A, having profession class B, having 44 AE, having 44 ADA class D. Class E says carrying on business if provisions of subsection 4 of 44 AD applicable and income exceeds maximum amount not chargeable to tax, get his accounts audited. That means we'll have to examine whether subsection 4 is applicable. If subsection 4 applies only, audit is necessary. If subsection 4 does not apply, then audit is not required. So merely because the assessee offers from eligible business less than 8 or 6%, audit is not applicable. This assessee, first we have to ask a question, whether availed the benefit of 44 AD in the ester years. From 17-18 assessment year onwards, whether this assessee has availed the benefit of 44 AD. We'll ask ourselves this question, 17 March, 18 March, 19 March, 20 March. If he has availed this benefit in any one of these years, then from that year, we'll have to count 5 years time. And in that block of 5 years, if he walks out, that only year of walking out plus 5 more years, he will not be able to avail the benefit. In those years, the income exceeds basic limit, audit will have to be conducted. Otherwise, it is not required. So keeping that principle in mind, we will try to take a few examples and see how that provision gets invoked or applied for the facts of those cases. For the sake of uniformity, I picked up only one particular line of activity, namely lodging business, which is an eligible business, and started adding facts to the case to appreciate how the events will unfold. Let us just take this particular example. Mr. S commenced his lodging business turnover for the first 2 years and income for the first 2 years given. Now, first year turnover 70 lakhs, income 3.5 lakhs. Whether for him 44 AD read with 44 AB applicable or not. This is the very first year of his business. Previously, he was not having any business. Now, it's the first year of his business. If at all his income happens to be less than 8 or 6% of income, we'll have to ask a question whether audit is necessary or not.
Who is there? Hello? Yes. Yes, please continue.
So now in this case, first year the turnover is 70 lakhs, the income is only 5%, which is less than 8 or 6%. Whether this assessee is liable to get the accounts audited because he is not offering 8 or 6%. Now, subsection 1 of 44 AD says in an eligible business, we'll have to offer 8% if it is non-banking channel receipts, and banking channel receipts of the turnover, it will be 6%. Now it is less than that. Whether the assessee has to get the accounts audited, we'll have to examine subsection 4, which says eligible assessee declares profit in any of the previous year. First, he should have offered income under 44 AD subsection 1. Then, in any of the subsequent 5 years, he is not offering in accordance with subsection 1. Now, in this case, this is the very first year. This assessee has not availed 44 AD subsection 1 in the past. Therefore, for him, subsection 4 will not apply. Since subsection 4 does not apply, subsection 5 will not mandate you to get the accounts audited. 44 AB clause E also says only for people covering under subsection 4 audit warranted. Now in this case, it's the first year. Previously, the assessee did not apply 44 AD subsection 1. Therefore, for him, there is no need to get the accounts audited. He can go with his book results, give his profit and loss account balance sheet information in the return of income, go with his book results as it is. Now we'll go to the next year. His turnover is 90 lakh. And the income is only 4.5 lakh rupees, which is again less than 8 or 6%. But this assessee has to again audit the accounts because his income happens to be less than 8 or 6%. Again, examining subsection 4, whether this assessee previously claimed the benefit of subsection 1 of 44 AD. Only then we'll have to examine whether he walks out or not. Now in this case, previous year he never availed 44 AD subsection 1. He went with book results. Therefore, this year, there is no need for application of subsection 4. Therefore, this assessee second year also not required to get the accounts audited. He can go with his book results, file return of income with profit and loss account balance sheet, declaring his book results. Now, this assessee has been doing
Mr. Kamath, would it be okay if I can, if I have a query over here to ask?
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, sure, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Kamath, in the earlier slide, as you mentioned, in the first 2 years, the audit will not be required. Technically, legally speaking, what you mentioned, I fully endorse your view. But my office, I've been told, and the person who are filing the return of income also, they will just confirm whether I'm correct or not. To understand that if a return of income is filed for the first year or maybe even the second year, they would, the CPC would raise a 139 notice saying that it's an invalid return. You have not got your accounts audited. This is the practical difficulty which is being faced while filing the return where the accounts are not audited. If Ashok Bhai or Mehta or anybody, they can also correct me if I am incorrect.
No, requesting other members to comment.
No, he's just getting their views also. Ashok, yeah.
Yeah, sir. Mahendra Bhai, this was an issue earlier, but in 2021, last 1 year, 1.5 years, they have accepted all below 1 crore as not audited unless it is under 44 AD 4 or 5.
The second year particularly. See, first year I understand they have accepted. Even the second year?
Yeah, because the second year also it is not crossing 1 crore and he is not in violation of 44 AD 4 and 5.
Yeah, I appreciate. So technically it is not a violation at all. That was what originally our view was, always we have been. But because of the CPC problem, the issue was of the CPC.
Yeah. So earlier, immediately after 17, 18, 18, 19, we were receiving some notices in this nature. But in last 19, 20 and 2021, I have not received any notices of this.
All right. Then okay. Then that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Yeah, Mr.
So, there is a view among certain chartered accountants which says that below 1 crore, if you're not showing 4480, you need to get audited. But that's not a correct view, sir.
Yeah, that's what even Mr. Kamath said, and I agree with that fully. Yeah, absolutely. That's not the view which even I endorse.
Ashok Mehtaji, I am also of the view that last 2 years, we have also not received any notices from CPC for following this principle. Earlier in the year, very early year of introducing this amendment, financial year 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, we had some surprises from CPC. But last 2 years, we have not come across any notices saying defective return for not getting the accounts audited on this account.
All right. We go ahead.
One query pertaining to this, if I can ask, suppose I have filled up balance sheet, profit and loss account and not availed of the exemption from maintaining books, and my profit is 10%. So can I say that I have not availed the benefit of 4480 since I have maintained books of accounts, and hence even in the next year, I did not get the accounts audited?
Absolutely. If the earlier years, 17 March, 18 March, 19 March, we have not availed 4480 subsection 1, then no issue. This is the first year, or in the earlier years also we have not availed 4480 subsection 1. We go with books, have more than 10% or more than 8%. We can say we are going with our book result. We have not availed 4480. Subsequent year also, audit would not be mandated.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Shall we proceed?
Yes,
yeah, I think, yes, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Now, same case with the different numbers. Assessment year 16, 17, turnover 80 lakh rupees, 4 lakh only income was able to be earned, 5% audit conducted. 17, 18, 82 lakhs, business income only 4, just for the number's sake I have taken 5%. Audit was filed, audit report was filed. As per the present discussion, 17, 18 amendment came. So for this SSC, previously he never availed 4480 subsection 1, and therefore this year there was no need for audit. Nevertheless, the SSC conducted audit. Similar is the scenario for 18 March. Similar is the scenario for 19 March. Similar is the scenario for 20 March. All these years, there was no need for him to get the accounts audited because previously he never availed 4480 subsection 1, but consistently and continuously they filed audit report. Now coming to current year, 21 March, because of COVID, turnover came down, profit continues to be same. Now whether this SSC has to get the accounts audited. From 17 March, none of the years he availed the benefit of 4480 subsection 1. He was only filing audit reports, which of course legally not required, but still he was filing it. Therefore, in the current year, since previously never availed the benefit of 4480 subsection 1, current year, there is no need to get the accounts audited. Even if the income happens to be less than 8 or 6%, he can go with the book results, give P&L balance sheet and file the return of income as such. Now, 18 March is the first year in which he has availed subsection 1 of 4480. 19 March, he has availed 4480. 20 March, he has availed 4480. Now, current year, because of COVID, he is unable to have that much income. So, therefore, his income level came down. So, his income is less than 8%. So, previously, he has availed 4480 subsection 1. From that, within 5 years, he has got a lock-in period of 5 years. Within that 5 years, now in first year, he has availed this. And within these 5 years, third year itself, he is walking out now. In which case, 4480 subsection 4 would apply for him. Now, subsection 5 says where subsection 4 applies, then audit would be required only if income exceeds basic limit. Now, in this case, the assessed income is 3.5 lakh. Now, he has got an eligible deduction of 1.5 lakh rupees under ATC. after claiming that the total income is going to be 2 lakh rupees for this individual. The total income is going to be less than basic limit, even if we are walking out within a block of 5 years after availing the first year benefit. Since the total income happens to be less than the basic limit, we are not required to get the accounts audited. So this assessee, even though he walks out in the financial year 21 March, since the total income has been less than basic limit, for him, there is no need to get the accounts audited. Now, it's a partnership firm, has got first year availed the benefit of 44AD subsection 1. Second year availed the benefit, third year. Now, March 21, there is a loss. Therefore, they are not able to offer 8 or 6% as the case may be. Now, what will happen to this partnership firm? One school of thought says for a partnership firm, we can say the basic exemption is 0. Loss means less than basic exemption. Therefore, it is less than basic limit. Therefore, the firm, although availed the benefit in previously under subsection 1 of 44AD, within a block of 4 years, it walks out, but still the income is less than basic limit and therefore it is not required to get the accounts audited. Another conservative school of thought is to say, for a partnership firm, there is no concept of basic limit. Therefore, even if it is minus 2.5 lakh, it has to get the accounts audited. Technically speaking, the second school of thought merits acceptance because for a partnership firm, there is no concept of basic limit, etc. Maximum amount not chargeable to tax. But however, when we file return of income with minus figure without audit, the scheme of the income tax department takes this as less than basic limit and does not send any defect notice for not getting the accounts audited. That means the schema is supporting the first view, and therefore one can take that view and say this is less than basic limit, therefore audit not warranted. Even though we walk out within a block of 5 years, since the income is falling less than basic limit, there is no need for getting the accounts audited. Now, this assessee availed the benefit of 44AD subsection 1 in the financial year ended March 18, also 19. Now, the next year, the assessee could not avail the benefit of 44AD because the turnover crossed 200 lakhs, 2 crore, for which then once the turnover touches or crosses 200 lakhs, then 44AD will not be applicable to that assessee. In that case, even though he will be obligated to get the accounts audited under section 44AB class A. Now, next year, it is less than 100 lakhs and he would like to take the benefit of 44AD, whether it is possible. Now, first he has availed the benefit under subsection 1 of 44AD in the year ended March 2018. Within a block of next 5 years, if he opts out, he cannot come in. Now, question is in the year ended March 20, whether he has opted out or the law does not permit him to be inside. Now, when subsection 4 is read carefully, it gives a meaning that the assessee should voluntarily get out by saying he is not willing to offer 8%, though otherwise he is eligible to get the benefit of subsection 1 of section 44A. Here is the case that he is walking, he is not voluntarily walking out, but the section does not permit him to be inside because his turnover increased beyond 200 lakhs and therefore it is not amounting to walking out as contemplated in subsection 4. So therefore, subsection 4 will not apply in this case, and in the subsequent year ended March 21, if the assessee would like to take the benefit of 44AD subsection 1, then it should be possible for him to get the benefit of 44AD subsection 1 because he has not voluntarily walked out in the third year. It is that the section which pushed him out because of 44AB clause A and 44AD explanation. Now, slightly differing the facts of the case. First year he has availed 44AD subsection 1. Second year he walked out voluntarily because his income was less than 8%. Subsection 4 of 44AD and subsection 44AB clause E came in. Now next year turnover went up beyond 200 lakhs and therefore he went under 44AB, 44AB. Now current year whether he can avail the benefit of 44AD. Now first he has availed 44AD subsection 1. Thereafter he came out. Having come out for next 5 years he cannot walk in. Having come out of 44AD in the year ended March 19, This year and plus 5 more years, he should not be able to walk in. Therefore, in the year ended March 21, he cannot get the benefit of 44 AD. And since for these years, he is obligated to maintain books of account, get the accounts audited in terms of section 44 AD subsection 5, read with 44 AB class E.
Sir, if I can raise an issue in the earlier example, in AY 2021, there was a limit of 5 crores for audit if I don't have that cash component in receipts or payment. So in 1920, when I have walked out, so in 2021, can I avail of that 5 crore limit?
Now, in this given example, or this slide or the next slide, sir?
Earlier slide. The second year was 5%. That one. The next slide.
Okay, fine. Second year, this assessee has walked out because turnover is less than 200 lakhs. Still, he is unable to offer 8 or 6%. Therefore, he walked out.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, third year, he walked out. Third year is 200 lakhs. Now, let us say he falls under the proviso below class A of 44 AB. Class A and Class B of the proviso says that so long as the cash components of receipts and payment less than 5% of the total receipts and payment up to 5 crore, there is no need for getting the accounts audited. Therefore, let us say in this case, he has not got the accounts audited since turnover has exceeded 200 lakhs, but still he is not getting accounts audited. Now,
so my question is, can he opt for not getting audited or he has to compulsory get it audited?
Now, if he has walked out here, can we get the benefit of 44 AB class A proviso, or we are getting the cases covered under 44 AB class E? That's the precise question. Now, he has walked out here, 19 March. 19 March, he walked out because he is unable to offer 8 or 6%. Subsection 4 applies and subsection 5 applies for that year, and 44 AB class E came in. Once it is so, next 5 years, he has to be governed by the provisions of 44 AB class E. Now, in that case, it will not be possible for him to say, in that year, I will take the benefit of 44 AB class A and then say, proviso gives me an exemption. That will be very difficult because for the next 5 years, he has to be governed by provisions of 44 AD class 4, read with class subsection 5 class E is what I personally feel.
So is it not that if
I have a different view, Mr. Ramnathji, over here. I would say that for assessment year 2021, since his turnover is exceeding the threshold above 2 CR, therefore the provisions of 44AD would not apply to him and he will be covered by 44AB. And 44AB, if the proviso helps in that his cash transactions are below the 5%, etc., in that case, the benefit of that proviso will be available to him and he would not be required to get his accounts audited. I would appreciate in the same example for assessment year 21-22, since the turnover is only 90 lakhs, but and though he is offering more than 6 or 8%, in that case he would be again required to get his accounts audited because here he would be covered by 44 AD. And the benefit of, since he has already, rather not the benefit, since he has already moved out for, so next 5 years, the block of that 5 years, he will not be able to take the benefit of not getting his accounts audited. This is my view.
Fine, sir. That, of course, one can take a view that 44 AD would apply up to 2 crore. Once somebody goes out of 2 crore, 44 AD itself is not applicable. Therefore, one can fall back on 44 AB clause A is one view, but I personally feel 44 AD subsection 4 and clause E of 44 AB should bring. Of course, difference of opinions may be there on the subject.
No, sir. Can you, for the participant, can you again elaborate? As Mahendra Bhai is saying, it is more than 2 crores, but less than 5 crores. and cash, that 5% cash is not there, then why it should not be, then audit may not be required, no? Why it will be required, you say?
No, subsection 4 of section 44 AD says once we walk out, year of walking out and 5 years, he cannot get in. And in that year, that 5 years time, year of walking out and 5 years, subsection 5 says he has to maintain the books and get the accounts audited. And subsection 5 is 4 and 5 is referred in subsection section 44 AB clause E. So
Okay.
therefore, one view to say 44 AB clause E will apply. Other school of thought, as Mahendra Bhai says, moment the turnover crosses 2 crore, 44 AD itself is not applicable. Therefore, subsection 4, subsection 5 also will not apply. Clause E of 44 AB will not apply. We'll examine under 44 AB clause A. Once it turnover crosses 2 crore, clause A only will come. But proviso gives an exemption. Therefore, we will not get the accounts audited. One view is that we'll get out of 44 AD completely, examine under 44 AB clause A. Then clause A will say once proviso comes, clause A will not apply. Other school is 44 AD mandates you to follow 45 years. Therefore, you will have to do it. That, of course, open for debate.
Right.
Now this is the your assessee where first year he has availed the benefit of 44 AD, though income is more than 8 or 10%. 80 lakh rupees turnover. Business income is only 8 lakh. 10% he has offered. And next year, turnover is continued to be less than 100 lakhs. And the income happens to be 6%, but let us presume for a moment it is cash. Because lodging business, some cash components are received. Therefore, it should be something more than 6%, but he is able to earn only 6%. Now, in this given scenario, he has got during this year an agency business. In addition to lodging business, he has commenced an agency business during this year. Now, this agency business resulted in another turnover of 20 lakh rupees with 2% margin. In this scenario, agency business is not coming within that eligible business. Therefore, whether this assessee is liable to get the accounts audited because previously he availed the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1. Current year he walks out. And this year and 5 more years he has to get in. Now, in this scenario, whether he has to get the accounts audited. It's the question before us. Now, if you see the provisions of 44 AD, eligible assessee, eligible business explanation, and subsection 6 of 44 AD, they are not similarly worded. In eligible assessee, eligible business case, the eligible business means any business other than the business of plying, hiring, leasing, goods carriages. That means eligible business is one business other than the business of plying, hiring, leasing, goods carriages. From the eligible business definition, the business of agency not removed. The section says, notwithstanding anything mentioned in the foregoing provision, the provisions of this section shall not apply to an assessee having agency business. So subsection 6 goes to say, if the assessee has an agency business, for him section 44 AD is not there in the statute at all. Notwithstanding anything contained in the foregoing provisions, the provisions of this section shall not apply to A, 44 AA subsection 1 professionals. B, assessee having brokerage or commission income. C, assessee having agency business. So moment the assessee has agency business, for him 44 AD per se would not apply. So that means subsection 4, subsection 5, subsection 1, nothing will apply for him. So in which case, since he has commenced agency business in the current year, even though he walks out, 44 AD itself is not applicable to him. He can go with book results. There is no need to get the accounts audited. Again, this is the literal interpretation of law. But when we put the numbers in the return schema, etc., to what extent we will be able to canvass this interpretation in presenting the accounts in the return, etc., is really a question mark, because today, how much ever we interpret the law, the return forms will dictate us how we will have to go by. So if you say there is an agency business, a new business code added, for that reason will it go to say 44 AD, subsection 4 is not applicable to you, we have to really test it, because literal interpretation goes to say the section itself is not applicable to him. But when we fill up the forms, it may throw some challenges, which also something to be taken care of. Similar is the scenario where an SSE has availed the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1, current year income came down, but he has received a commission of 10,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees in a land deal. He has got income in the form of brokerage or commission. For him, then the section 44 AD should not apply. Then entire 44 AD does not apply. Subsection 4, 5 also should not apply. 44 AB class E also should not apply.
But any experience, anybody that what is the, as per the schema, what is happening?
Sharma Sahab, the little difficult to experience this. The reason being the turnover, I suppose, is merged, whether it is for your eligible business or commission. Now, since you are not able to, there is no separate disclosure, the computer or the system would not know whether what is the amount which is coming out of the agency business. And therefore, I think it would not get triggered. That should be what logically I understand. This should be the reason. But very technically, what Mr. Ramnathji said, it makes sense. Yes, since it is not, they cannot test, the computer has no scope to test it, the things doesn't get flagged.
Okay. So once commission business, then 44 AD will not apply.
That the provisions are very clear. Yes. Okay. That's the reason, if you see practically, if it's a small amount, sometimes people try to show that it's not a business income, it's more of an income from other sources, so that they can still avail the benefit if it's a straight transactions.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And interestingly, for agency, the language business is given, but reference to bonus or commission, the business is not there in 44 AD subsection 6. It says income in the form of commission or brokerage. So it could even be chargeable under other sources. One can technically take a view, but as I said, in the real life scenario, when we present the numbers in the return of income, to what extent we can communicate and get this difference highlighted is a real subject which one should get over. Similarly, this SSE has got a lodging business and continues, but the second point is he commenced his consultancy practice and earned a lakh of rupees. Same thing. In SSE, he has got a profession covered under 44 AA subsection 1. For him, section 44 AD per se does not apply. Therefore, question of walking out, getting accounts audited, etc. should not apply. But whatever technical matters we have discussed will continue to hold good here also. This SSE has engaged. This is the point which we have already covered. If he has walked out and the turnover happens, now this is a scenario where slightly the facts are different. Previously, the SSE availed the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1. Current year, the turnover happens to be less than 200 lakhs. But still, he would like to take the benefit. He is not willing to offer that specified percentage because some cash transactions are there. He has to offer 8, but he is not offering. In which case he is walking out. Can he take the benefit of 44 AB class A? So now once it is less than 200 lakhs, he will come only under 44 AD subsection 4 read with subsection 5, also 44 AB class E. So for him, the SSE has to necessarily say he is walking out. Therefore, you will not be able to take the benefit that less than 5% is only cash transaction. And therefore, I will take up to 5 crore rupees or current year up to 10 crore rupees. I will not get the accounts audited. That will be strictly, in this case, not possible because he is coming under 44 AD, class 4, subsection 4 and 5, and class E of 44 AB. Now, 44 AD, few other issues about the eligibility part, etc. Can a professional avail the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1? Section 44 AD subsection 6 categorically says profession covered under 44 AA subsection 1 cannot take the benefit. So previously, prior to introduction of the amendment by Finance Act 2012 with effect from 1st of April 2011, people were taking the benefit. To address that issue, this retrospective amendment came into the statute. Effectively to say, the section says eligible SSC carrying on eligible business. Business is defined in section 2.
हाँ, आज 5th Saturday है। आज खुली है।
Hello.
Dhaval, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry, sir.
Section applies to an eligible SSC carrying on eligible business. Now, business is defined in 2 clause 13. Profession is defined in 2 clause 36 separate. So, business includes trade, commerce, manufacture, or any adventure or concern in the nature of trade, commerce, manufacture. Profession is defined to include vocation. But the law specifically does not say business includes profession. There are a number of instances where business is separately dealt with, profession is separately dealt with, although the computation mechanism is one and the same in chapter 4D. So, therefore, eligible SSC dealing with eligible business can get the benefit of 44 AD. But when it comes to exclusion part, 44 AD subsection 6 only talks about in a profession covered in 44 AA subsection 1. Subsection 1 of 44 AA talks about specified professionals and notified professionals. Totally 11 professionals are given there. 7 of them already specified in the statute and 4 subsequently notified by this notification. And therefore, all those 11 professions will not come under 44 AD. What about the other professions? Now, 44 AA subsection 2 talks about all businesses and profession other than what is mentioned in subsection 1 of 44 AA. That means there are other professionals not so mentioned in 44 AA subsection 1. Those are covered under subsection 2 of 44 AA. Can those people coming under subsection 2 of 44 AA avail the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1? Going by logic, eligible SSC carrying on eligible business only can avail the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1. Other professionals other than 44 AA subsection 1 also should not get the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1. But by excluding subsection 1 of 44 AA, it gives an impression that subsection 2 of 44 AA businesses and other professionals can also take the benefit of 44 AD. Because of this language, one can take a view. If you see the codes given for the purpose of choosing the businesses and getting the eligibility of 44 AD, these professions covered are otherwise eligible for 44 AD. They are coming under 44 AA subsection 2, but still 44 AD permits filing income by availing 44 AD in these cases as well. Advertising, auctioneers, labor recruitment, personnel recruitment, investigation, security services, all these things, though they are considered as profession, they are coming under 44 AA subsection 2, and the schema permits furnishing return by availing the benefit of 44 AD. So, by excluding subsection 1 of 44 AA, it gives an impression that subsection 2 of 44 AA can fall under 44 AD, and the schema also provides the benefit by making this particular principle. Then comes an issue as to whether a person owning more than 10 goods carriages can avail the benefit of 44 AD. Eligible SSC carrying on eligible business. That word eligible business is so defined in the explanation to say any business except the business of plying, hiring, leasing goods carriages, referred to in 44A. 44AE says upon SSC owning at any time during the previous year 10 goods carriages or less would be entitled for the benefit under 44AE. Whether this definition of eligible goes to say whether the SSC who is otherwise eligible to fall under 44AE alone gets excluded for 44AD, or the business of plying, hiring, leasing goods, so referred to in 44A, whether that business itself is not eligible business. So, if the business per se is regarded as business which is not an eligible business, whether the SSC is otherwise eligible to come under 44AE or otherwise, the business itself is not eligible, because the word eligible business means any business except the business of plying, hiring, leasing of goods carriages, referred to in 44A. It is not otherwise eligible to get the benefit of 44A. Therefore, one can say the business of plying goods carriages, etc., would not be eligible under 44AD when the number of vehicles owned by him is 10 or more at any point in time during the previous year. Then comes partner receiving interest and salary from the firm. Can he take the benefit of 44AD? The views canvassed for avail the benefit of the 44AD is business income definition. The business includes that section 28 clause 5 says income in the form of interest and remuneration received from the firm is also chargeable under the head business. So therefore it is a business head. Therefore, why not we take the benefit of 44AD? Now section 44AD says eligible SSE carrying on eligible business. Now when a partner is a partner in a firm and the firm carries on business, it is the firm which carries on the business and not the partner who carries on the business of the firm per se individually. And therefore, one should take a view that partnership firm interest and remuneration, though is a taxable amount under the head business, going under 44AD is not possible. And Honorable Madras High Court, in last time when we discussed, we have only Honorable Madras Tribunal judgment, A. Ananda Kumar case. Now Madras High Court endorsed the view of Ananda Kumar's case of the tribunal to say 44AD would not be possible to be claimed in respect of a source of interest and remuneration received from the firm. And we have old judgment to say investment in partnership firm is not amounting to business. Punjab and Haryana High Court has already endorsed it. And this Madras High Court also goes to say interest remuneration received from the firm per se cannot constitute an income liable to be covered under 44AD. But if the assessee is able to demonstrate that from this source of revenue, he has incurred expenditure for the purpose of earning this income in the form of interest paid on money borrowed to invest into this partnership firm, few other expenses in connection with earning this particular income. He is using car, he is employing driver to go to the firm and carry on business, etc. And the assessee is able to demonstrate that these expenses are incurred for the purpose of earning this income. Nothing prohibits the assessee to claim these deductions by saying this is the source of income in the form of interest and remuneration from the firm. As permitted by law, the deductions otherwise allowable subject to section 38, personal element, etc. Whatever applied for the purpose of earning this income, that can be claimed. And if the balance happens to be even less than 8%, less than 6%, or even minus, so long as he is able to demonstrate these expenditures are incurred for the purpose of earning income in the form of interest and remuneration, he is entitled to claim it. Nothing prohibits. Going by presumptive methodology, just saying I'll offer 8 or 6% of the interest and remuneration received is something which is not permissible, but nowhere the law says no deduction is permissible. The deduction otherwise eligible under the provisions of law can continue to be claimed subject to maintaining records and proving the eligibility otherwise.
Only as a precaution, if one need to be little careful that section, since he will be getting a share of profit also, which is an exempt income. So provisions of section 14A one needs to take care.
Absolutely, sir. That's the next point I thought I was about to say. Since the revenue which is generated from this source is interest, remuneration, and share income. That means we have all the three, out of which 2 chargeable and 1 is exempt, which is composite income coming both taxable and tax-free income. Section 14A will get into service and one has to properly factor it.
Side issue we can discuss is, as you said, this is a firm's business. So many times the issue is raised whether in such cases, whether 44AB audit is required when there is only remuneration from the partnership firm.
Yeah, fine.
So same principle should apply.
Yeah. Same principle.
It is not
he is not carrying on business. It is a partnership firm which is carrying on business. Therefore, whatever interest and remuneration received, even if it crosses the limit of, suppose a professional firm pays to the professional partner more than 50 lakh, the audit should not be there. There is only one tribunal judgment went against the SC, believing that by and large majority goes to say there is no audit required under 44AB class B. Same principle should apply here also.
For benefit of all, can we get some citation where it is held that audit is not required?
Yes, sir.
Because if possible.
Yeah, I will send it.
Even in the Mumbai tribunal, there is a case where penalty has been dropped. I mean,
dropped, but confirmed.
No, penalty has been dropped, but audit is not applicable is not discussed. And there are Calcutta tribunal against, I think 2 judgments I know. One is Usha Narayanan and the other one I don't remember. Where in fact on the partner they have levied penalty.
Bombay High Court, Bombay Tribunal, there are 2 or 3 decisions which says that audit is not required. One is our professional firm itself. I don't remember the citation, but we have a citation favorable. We have the cases favorable also.
One is Hitesh Gajaria case. Hitesh Gajaria case, it was regarding...
Yeah, Hitesh Gajaria case, that's an old case. It started from there. Hitesh Gajaria was the first one. Yeah.
In fact, Hitesh Gajaria was against the SSC.
Yeah, it was only cautioning the penalty, not discussing anything about audit applicability.
Right.
Yeah. You can move, sir. Yes.
Yes. And section does not give the benefit of availing the benefit of 44 AD for a non-resident SSC or with reference to status, residential status. Coming to the status of the SSC, LLP, AOP, BOI or a company cannot get benefit because only an individual HUF and partnership firm can get the benefit of 44 AD. And if there is more than one eligible business is there, whether we need to club it or we can go business wise, when businesses are independent and they are able to get revenues, risk and reward being different, where after the civil construction and retail trade got combined and made into eligible business, one view would be to aggregate all eligible business, and it is not within the eligible business. One can say for one eligible business, I'll go under 44 AD and another eligible business, I will go under 44 A, B or with the books of account, etc. So individually for each business, assessee is not required to say I will offer at least 8 or 6%. Aggregated turnover and aggregated profit. If totally it is going to be more than 8 or 6% as the case may be, then the assessee is entitled to take the benefit of 44 AD. But for the all eligible businesses, one should aggregate, and all eligible business profit we should compare and see whether the percentage is maintained or not. And that is how one has to read the provision of law. Now, there are a couple of other controversies associated with section 44 AD, namely when the officer doubts the very turnover itself, considering the bank statements or expenditure is sought to be proved in the course of the assessment, and claiming remuneration and interest against the presumptive income, and other provisions such as 40A3, 40A1A or 40A43B, etc. All that we'll take up for our discussion after we discuss the basic aspects of 44 ADA and AE. Thereafter, we'll take up these common controversies for all the cases together. Now, 44 ADA. Who can avoid?
Hello, there is a question. Yes, there is a question whether physiotherapist can claim benefit under section 44 ADA.
When in 44 ADA profession, I'll show the screen, Sarmaji, that what codes are there. Once we show the screen, this question will get addressed.
Yes.
Coming to 44 ADA, the individual and partnership firm other than LLP. Until 2011, the section said every associate, but the original intent to the amendment when the provision came into statute, the finance bill explaining that went on to say individual firm other than LLP, but the section said only assessee. So by the Finance Act 2021, the section was amended to say individual and partnership firm other than LLP. And the residential status of the assessee should be resident. Activity should be profession specified under 44 AA subsection 1. So now how much we need to offer? 50% of the gross receipt, so long as the gross receipt does not exceed 50 lakh rupees. Such other sum claimed to have been earned by the assessee. Other conditions similar to what we saw for 44 AD, namely deduction under 30 to 38 deemed to be claimed and allowed in full. WDV of the asset used for the profession deemed to have been calculated as if depreciation has been claimed and allowed in full for the IS consent. Now, if the income is not offered as specified in subsection 1, we'll have to maintain the books of account and get the books of account audited in terms of section 44AB clause D if the total income exceeds basic limit, similar to what we saw in 44AD. 44ADA also says only if the income exceeds basic limit, the return has to be, that audit is required to be carried out. These professions are contemplated in the Act itself, and these are the 4 professions which are subsequently notified by the board in the official gazette. So legal, medical, engineering, architecture, profession of accountancy, technical consultancy, interior decoration, and authorized representative, film artist, company secretary, and information technology. Totally 11 professions are covered under 44AA subsection 1. Now, section applies only to resident SSE and only to a partnership firm and individual because of the amendment came in the Finance Act 21. And 44AA subsection 2 deals with other professions other than these 11 professionals. For them, 44ADA would not apply. As we have concluded, for them, they can take the benefit of 44AD. And if it is found to be beneficial, otherwise they can go by books of account and reporting the income based on whatever which they are able to get as per the books. Now, this medical profession, this is what is discussed in this paper which has come along with the return. General hospitals will come under this, specialty, nursing home, diagnostic center, pathological laboratories, all this comes. Then blood banks can come under 44AD, medical transcription, independent ambulance service, suppliers, agencies, medical clinics, all will come under 44AD, but medical clinics will come under 44ADA. Dental practice, Ayurveda, Unani, homeopathy, nurses, physiotherapist will come under 44ADA. Physiotherapist will come under 44ADA under medical healthcare cases, and therefore they will not be able to avail the benefit of 44AD. So that is, I think that answers this query. Whether they can claim the benefit of 44AD, they will be able to get the benefit of 44ADA. That means so long as the gross receipt is less than 50 lakh and they are ready to offer 50% 44ADA, otherwise get the accounts audited, but they will not be able to take the benefit of 44AD. And these are all other cases which are discussed in this scheme. Now, that is with reference to medical. Then accounting, that is profession of accountancy, it goes, a few other things are clubbed. Accounting, bookkeeping, auditing profession covered here, tax consultancy covered here, fashion designing and photography. I am unable to reconcile myself within this 11 profession where this fashion designing and photography comes to say it will fall under 44ADA. Similarly, culture and sport, this code goes to say individual artists excluding author, literary activities, other cultural activities. I am unable to reconcile myself as to where this particular case would come under 44ADA to fall within the 11 professionals contemplated. These are the 5 cases where I am unable to reconcile. The rest at least we will be able to sync it with those 11 professions which is specified and notified by the Act and the notification concern. Computer related services, these are all coming under 44ADA, but these things fall under 44AD, cybercaf, computer training and educational activities all come under 44AD. That these are the cases comes under 44ADA. And interest and remuneration can be claimed, all deduction deemed to be allowed. So for firm, interest and remuneration deemed to be allowed already. There is no fresh claim possible, unlike 44AE. When assets are sold, resulting in income, if the block becomes negative, it will be chargeable under section 50, but that presumptive income will not include it. Therefore, we will have to independently offer this income. Because what is contemplated in the presumptive income is only business income. What comes under section 50 is chargeable under capital gains. Therefore, it has to be independently offered. Now, 44ADA and related audit contemplated in 44AB clause D. We'll just take a couple of examples to appreciate it. Annual gross receipt 10 lakh rupees, net profit only 4 lakh from that particular profession, but he has got some ATC benefits and house property losses. The total income becomes less than basic limit. Similar to 44AD, 44ADA also says, in case an assessee carrying on profession, if he claims his professional income is less than the limit prescribed under 44ADA and his income exceeds maximum amount not chargeable to tax, then audit is required. Here, income is less than 50%, net income is less than 50% of the gross receipt, but however, the total income is less than basic limit, and therefore, this assessee is not required to get the accounts audited. Now, Mr. HS is practicing as an advocate, gross receipt is above 50 lakhs, that is 60 lakhs. Net income from the profession is 20 lakhs. And he says his cash receipts and cash payments less than 5% of the total receipts and payments, whether he would be liable to get the accounts audited. Now, the proviso below class A is placed only below class A. Section 44AB class A says up to 1 crore business. Below that proviso says 1 is substituted by 10 crore for the financial year 21 March. Proviso is not placed below class B or class C or class D or class E. So even if the profession receipts above 50 lakh and he maintains less than 5% cash receipt, there is no incremental number available similar to that otherwise available for a business case. 1 crore substituted by 10 crore. That 50 lakh number not substituted by any larger number for those assessees who are following less than 5% cash dealings. For them, whether or not they follow less than 5% or otherwise, their cash dealings. Once the gross receipt exceeded 50 lakh rupees, they have to maintain the books of account, get the accounts audited. But it is high time where similar to business cases, for professional case also, if the revenue comes up with an amendment to prescribe larger number, and the discipline of maintaining the accounts and paying cash, lesser cash transactions would get encouraged, and the smaller cases can get out of the audit. This is a very peculiar case where the farm takes up a shape something from what the law says. Let us take this practical example where the doctor runs clinic as well as a pharmacy. Now, professional gross receipt, only 40 lakhs. Sales in pharmacy, medical shop is 70 lakh. Now, the assessee would like to say, for my professional gross receipt, I'll offer 50% going by 44 ADA. For sales in pharmacy, I'll go by 8% by 44, allowing 44 AD, whether he can do so. 44 AD talks about eligible assessee carrying on eligible business. Subsection 6 of 44 AD says, the provisions of this section, notwithstanding anything contrary, anything contained in the foregoing provision shall not apply to person carrying on profession under 44 AA subsection 1. This is an assessee, medical professional falling under 44 AA subsection 1. That being the case, for him, section 44 AD should not apply at all. In that case, he will not be able to take the benefit of 44 AD subsection 1. But now the assessee says, I am having profession 44 coming under this medical profession with the code. And also he says, I am doing pharmacy. And he starts getting the benefit of 44 AD by saying my pharmacy sales 70 lakhs and I am offering 8%. And my gross professional receipts from the profession is 40 lakh and for which I am offering 50%. Though section bars him to avail the benefit of 44 AD, the form permits it. We fill up these two separate revenue streams, avail benefit of 44 AD for pharmacy and 44 ADA for medical profession. The form permits and the return comfortably goes without any error thrown up. So therefore, the section does not allow the assessee to avail the benefit of 44 AD, but the form allows it, which is something very peculiar. But of course, there are other cases where form does not permit what is otherwise eligible to assessee. This is one case where the form permits assessee to avail something which otherwise legally the assessee may not be entitled. Quickly, let us rush through 44 AE. Who can avail the benefit of 44 AE? Status-wise, no restriction. Residential status, no restriction. And the nature of activity, engaged in the business of flying, hiring, leasing goods carriages. Now, other additional condition, not owns more than 10 goods carriages at any time during the previous year. How much to offer? Heavy goods vehicle, 1,000 rupees per ton for the gross vehicle weight or unladen weight for every month or part thereof. Other than heavy goods vehicle, 7,500 rupees per month for every month or part thereof. Or such higher amount claimed to have been earned by the assessee actually, whichever is higher. Other conditions, what we saw for 44 AD or ADA equally would apply. Reduction under section 30 to 38. deemed to have been already given effect to in full, and no further deduction shall be allowed. And peculiarly, proviso below subsection 3 goes to say, in case of a partnership firm, salary and interest paid to partners subject to 40 small b limit shall be further allowed to be deducted while computing the income under subsection 1 of that section. This was the proviso which was there in 44 AD itself, 44 AE, old 44 AF. But 44 AD, the proviso got deleted. 44 ADA, when it was introduced in the statute itself, it did not have the proviso. 44 AE, peculiarly, proviso continues to be there. So for a person carrying on the business of plying, hiring, leasing, goods carriages, and offering income, being a partnership firm, offering income in a presumptive manner, he will be entitled to get the benefit of interest and remuneration paid to partner. In addition to, after quantifying the presumptive income, he can further claim this as a partnership firm, and the partners have to offer that income in their personal capacity. This benefit was previously available under 44 AD, but withdrawn. 44 AD right from the beginning did not have, but the benefit continues to be available in the case of 44 AE. And interestingly, one may say the subsection 3 uses the language 30 to 38. And therefore, why one should not even otherwise claim the benefit of 40 small b? 40 small b is outside 30 to 38, and therefore why one should not claim the benefit of 40b? Therefore, why not under 44 AD or 44 ADA? Somebody would try to take up that particular argument. For that, what we need to see is the 40 small b is not an enabling provision to claim interest and remuneration. It is only a restricting provision, or it is only a disabling provision, because it starts with a negative note. Nothing shall be allowed unless the following conditions are satisfied. So the enabling provision to claim interest under income tax law is section 36 subsection 1 clause 3. The enabling provision to claim remuneration is section 37. When somebody makes payment by way of an interest, he has to satisfy the conditions of section 36(1)(3) to get the benefit of deduction of that interest. And if the payment is so made, not to third parties but to a partner, then in addition to satisfying the conditions of section 36(1)(3), he has to necessarily satisfy the conditions of 40 small b. Similarly, when the payment is made by way of remuneration, to a third party, we have to satisfy the conditions of 37. When a partner is paid remuneration, in addition to satisfying the conditions of section 37, one has to satisfy the conditions of 40 small b. So therefore, 40 small b is only a restricting provision, not an enabling provision. 36(1)(3), 37 are the enabling provisions to claim interest and remuneration. By virtue of this proviso, we are getting the benefit for firm carrying on the business coming under 44 AE. Because of the deletion of the proviso under 44 AD and not having the proviso at all under 44 ADA, firms coming under 44 AD or 44 ADA would not be in a position to get the benefit of deducting remuneration and interest from the income computed under presumptive method. This principle that interest and remuneration covered under first by virtue of 36(1)(3) and 37 and followed further by 40 small b, highlighted by Honorable Supreme Court in Munjal Sales Corporation case. The return on value of the asset shall be calculated as if depreciation is allowed in full. Whatever condition we have already found, the same condition would continue to be there for this particular provision as well. What other benefits are there if the income is offered as per the presumptive provision? If the income is offered as per the presumptive provision, there is no need to maintain the books of account as contemplated under 44AA subsection 2. No need to get the accounts audited as contemplated in section 44AB clause A. The turnover and income of this business, this business of plying, hiring goods carriages, would not be included for the purpose of section 44AA and 44AB. Suppose the SSC has got income from this business. Also, he has got few other businesses. For ascertaining the turnover of 44AB, so long as the SC goes under 44AE for this income from the business of plying goods carriages, this turnover shall be excluded and the balance turnover will be tested for the applicability of 44AB. So the turnover and income of this business shall not be included for the purpose of ascertaining the limit of 44A and 44AB for deciding the books of account to be maintained and deciding the accounts to be audited. What if the income not offered as specified in subsection 1 and 2? We'll have to maintain the books of account for this business and get that books of account audited in terms of section 44AB clause C. Peculiarly, in this case, unlike 44AD and 44ADA, this audit requirement continues even if the total income does not exceed the basic limit. In 44AD and 44ADA, the law went on to say that audit would be required only if the total income exceeds basic limit. This was new insertion in those laws. Previously, originally that was not there in the old 44AD when it was discussing about civil construction business, and 44AF dealing with retail. By which time 44AE also had the similar language. Once the income is not offered as specified in subsection 1 and 2, books of account need to be maintained and accounts have to be audited whether or not the total income exceeds the basic limit. That condition continues to remain in 44AE, but of course in 44AD and ADA, that was relaxed. Only if the income exceeds basic limit, audit is warranted. Now, when the limit went up from 7,500 rupees per vehicle per month to larger vehicles where capacity is 12 ton or above, certain languages are introduced to say goods carriage, gross vehicle weight, unladen weight will have the meaning from Motor Vehicle Act, and heavy goods vehicle means goods carriage, gross vehicle weight of which exceeds 2,000 kilograms, 12 tons above. Income Tax Act says heavy goods vehicle means goods carriage, vehicle weight of which exceeds 12,000 kilograms. But under Motor Vehicle Act, heavy goods vehicle means any goods carriage, the gross vehicle weight of which, or tractor or road roller, the unladen weight of which. So in Motor Vehicle Act, the word unladen weight applies only to tractor or road roller, which exceeds 12,000. But in income tax law, that is used interchangeably in the sense to say gross vehicle weight or unladen weight is how the language comes. So now it gives an impression whether the unladen weight also to be applied or otherwise only after adding this we have to take up. So there, for that, now the language here, unladen weight means the weight of vehicle or trailer, including all equipment ordinarily used, but excluding the weight of the driver or attendant, and where alternative parts of bodies are used, the unladen weight of the vehicle means the weight of the vehicle with heaviest such alternative body is what Motor Vehicle Act says. And our Income Tax Act says gross vehicle weight or unladen weight. That means that distinction what came in Motor Vehicle Act had not come properly in the income tax law. And for which when the this Lorry Association had requested a clarification from the board has opined that all goods carriage vehicle whose gross vehicle weight exceeds 12,000 kilograms, the profit will be considered under 44AE at the rate of 1,000 rupees per ton of gross vehicle weight. In respect of tractor or road roller, where the gross vehicle weight is not applicable and unladen weight exceeds 12,000 kilograms, the profit and gains from the goods carriage for the purpose of 44AE shall be 1,000 per ton of the unladen weight. So only for a tractor and roller, the unladen weight will come because for them gross vehicle weight will not be applicable is what the board clarified in its clarification. So effectively 44AE does not give any restriction on the type of the SSCs. Even AOP, BOI, limited company, LLP, all can get the benefit of 44AE as against the other two provisions. Now, a limited company is engaged in the business of plying goods carriages. Now, it will have a provision, normal provision. It maintains books of account, get the accounts audited, it will have normal provision, ascertaining normal income. Followed thereafter, it will have 44AE. Also, it will have 115 JB, provided it opts out, provided does not opt out to have this concessional rate of tax, whereby 115 JB does not apply to them. In that case, there is a need to see how the law works. Now, under normal provision, this company has income 2,20,000 and the effective rate of tax, the tax works out to 68,640. Now, we apply an SSC limited company having only 3 lorries. All of them are not heavy goods carriages. The income will be 3 vehicle into 7,500 per month per vehicle into 12 months will be 2,70,000 and 84,000 rupees, 84,240 will be the tax on that. Now let us take 115 JB. The book income happens to be 5 lakh rupees. Then we'll work out the 115 JB tax work out to be 78. Now which will prevail? is something we will have to reconcile. Now, normal provision, if it happens to be something less than the presumptive provision, the SSC would say my actual book income is less than the presumptive provision. Therefore, I'll maintain the books of account, gets the accounts audited. Anyway, for corporate, I'm getting the accounts audited. For income tax also, I'll get audited. Therefore, I'll take this away. I'll go by this. Now, this we will have to see. If the SSC doesn't want to get the benefit of concessional rate, we'll have to see the interplay between normal provision and 115 JB. If the tax on 115 JB is more than the tax on normal income, the book profit shall be deemed to be the total income and tax thereon will be the tax payable. Then book profit will prevail. The SSC doesn't want to get this 115 JB by availing concessional rate, then this 115 JB will not apply. We'll have to see only the interplay between the 44AE under normal provision. Since it's a limited company and it will have its books of account maintained, audited, it is better to go with book income. If it is less than the 44AE, also better to go. If it is more than that, also better to go, because it is better to report the actual income, even if the presumptive income is less than the actual income, better to go by actual income. And very interestingly, this section does not have any turnover restrictions. It has only number of vehicles owned by the SSC at any time during the previous year, not exceeding 10 at any time during the previous year. Now, the language of the law says the assessee should not own any at any time exceeding 10 vehicle at any time during the previous year. But in the form it says vehicle taken on lease, hire, flying of goods carriages by hiring, leasing goods, flying goods carriages. So now, if the assessee has got 8 vehicles and he has taken few more vehicles on lease, what will be happening? Whether he has hired few more vehicles owned by somebody else. Since he is in the business of flying goods carriages, whether we will have to count all this. Section says he should own only 10 vehicles on ownership. But when we start filling up the form and we start saying for our owned vehicle number, etc., we are giving, and we take on hire and also get revenue from that, we pay higher charges to the owner. When put together, if it crosses 10, whether the section is not applicable, the form gives the meaning that you start filling up the vehicle details. It asks you whether you are owning it or you are hiring it or you have leased it out. In which scenario? Now, if it is more than 10, own vehicle 10 and few other vehicle leased, section does not permit to avail the benefit. So now form says you are not entitled to get benefit if the vehicle owned, hired or leased put together crosses 10. But technically section applies only when the assessee owns up to 10 vehicles and over and above only section does not permit. So now practically this poses difficulty, and in which scenario own vehicle income will come here, and other than own vehicle income, can somebody takes the benefit of 44AD? As we have discussed that business of flying goods carriages itself will not be able to come under 44AD. Therefore, other income one has to explore how to fill up in the normal course. Book not maintained will throw surprises by invoking 44AA subsection 2 and 139 will come. So for other income, we'll have to maintain books and get these audited if the turnover limit crosses. Now, the codes prescribed by the return filing forms goes to say, these are the cases coming under goods carriages eligible to come under 44AE as well as 44AD. This gives an impression that if we take more vehicle from others and we'll not come under 44AD, AE, then why not we come under 44AD? That gives an impression, but technically one should not, but form prescribes that renting of land, transport equipment, packers and movers, all that can come under 44AE as well as 44AD. It gives an impression that one should be able to file it. Now, as I said already, if the assessee has income less than the presumptive income, but it is going to be less than the basic limit, what will happen? Income from the business actually earned is 150, but presumptive income is 180. And you would like to offer only 150 for some technical reasons. What would happen? Whether in this case, since it is less than basic limit, can he say, I'll not get the accounts audited? Answer would be no. Even if the income is less than basic limit, so long as he is unable to offer the income as per 44AE, he will not be able to take the benefit of this getting away from audit. He has to get the accounts audited. Now, partnership firm owning lorries, and it has got a turnover of 120 lakhs. Number of vehicles, all are less than 12 tons, 10 vehicles, no other vehicle taken on lease. Now 10 vehicles, 12 months, 7,500 per month, income comes 9 lakh under presumptive provision. As per books of account, before claiming interest 12 lakh, after claiming interest 4 lakh. Now what is the possibility? Now, as we discussed, 44AE says presumptive income before claiming interest and remuneration. That is 12 lakh, which is more than 9 lakh rupees. The firm say, have got evidence to suggest this income is deployed, better to offer this 12 lakh rupees, which is more than 9 lakh. They can go by this. And afterwards, they can claim 4 lakh and 8 lakh rupees they can offer. And if the firm says, I'll offer only 9 lakh and then continue to claim 4 lakh, it takes its own risk, but it is better to offer the actual income earned. And it is amounting to compliance. And since the turnover has exceeded 100 lakh, there is no problem. This turnover shall be excluded from all the business turnover for the purpose of deciding the tax audit applicability. Depreciation shall be deemed to be allowed in full. So suppose some vehicles are sold out of this 10 vehicle or whatever the assessee wants, and because of that sale, the negative block becomes negative, then that has to be offered under section 50, and that cannot be considered to be part of this presumptive income. And if the assessee claimed less than the quantum prescribed in subsection 2, audit is necessary, maintenance of books of necessary. But the assessee doesn't maintain books, doesn't get the accounts audited. What will be the consequence? Leaving the technical part of it, the assessee doesn't maintain books, doesn't get the accounts audited, CPC would say your return is invalid or rather defective, get that done, otherwise it will be declared invalid. And when I was in the Direct Tax Committee last year, suggestion was made to say, if for some reason the assessee could not get the accounts audited, he was willing to place the available evidences, but the auditors are saying that these evidences doesn't give comfort to us and therefore we are unable to get the accounts audited. For that reason, the assessee says, okay, let me at least file the return. I will face the music for not getting the accounts audited. But why should I be debarred from filing the return itself? Let that assessee be allowed to file return, because if he doesn't file return tomorrow for bank loan, he will not have evidences, etc. Therefore, we made representation to say, let the return not be declared as invalid for non-furnishing of the audit report. Let the return be accepted as it is, but consequences of non-furnishing of audit report can continue. But that representation went, we have to see how that is going to get reflected. As the law stands today, 139(9) says where an audit is required, you'll have to get the accounts audited, failing which the return may be declared as defective. And if the defect is not cured within the stipulated time or the extended time so allowed, the return will be declared as not even filed. This particular provision came into statute when only 44AB had two limbs. 44AB class A, business turnover exceeding 40 lakh rupees, professional gross receipt exceeding 10 lakhs those days. By that time, 139(9) went on to say, if you do not give the audit report, the return will be declared defective. But there are now smaller cases coming into audit because of not able to offer the prescribed time limit, threshold percentage or the quantum. In those cases, not getting accounts audited, should it go to say the return itself be declared as defective? This was what is represented. We'll have to wait and see how it will go. But as the law stands today, the CPC will start sending defective notices and consequences will follow. Keeping aside the technical part for a moment. Now, the assessee did not maintain the books of account, did not get the accounts audited. What would be the consequences, keeping aside the technical part of it? Can the officer say, we will say you have to offer minimum this income? You say you have got lesser income, but we will substitute the presumptive income. And also we will say you have not maintained the accounts, you have not got the accounts audited, therefore we will levy you penalty. Can that be done? Or they'll increase the income as well as they will levy penalty. What would be the consequences? First, the assessing officer can at best say you have not complied with the provision relating to maintenance of books of account and the accounts not getting audited. Therefore, penal consequences will follow. But the officer is not entitled to jack up the income to the extent of presumptive income merely because the accounts are not audited by the assessee. So, incremental income added to the income return not permissible unless there are other evidences, merely because that assessee did not comply with the audit provisions. But penal consequences will follow. A few other aspects, when the assessee can choose only for few vehicles and few other vehicles, can he go under 44 AE choosing between out of 5 vehicles, for 2 I will go under this, the rest I will maintain books of account, not permissible. The whole business of flying goods carriages together we'll have to consider. And turnover crossing 1 crore rupees, not a matter at all, because this section does not have any turnover restrictions. And when a part of the period it is listed between group concerns, it need not come under 44AE. It can go by its normal provisions. To sum up with the provisions of law relating to 44AD, ADAE, residential status, 44AE alone permits both AE non-resident and resident, whereas 44AD and ADA, resident only can get the benefit. For 44AD, status of the assessee should be individual, HUF, firm other than LLP. 44ADA, individual and firm other than LLP. For 44AE, no such restriction. When percentage or sum specified in the section is not offered, 44AB would apply. In case of 44AD, only if subsection 4 applies. In 44AD, if the basic income exceeds basic limit, then it will apply. For 44AE, whether or not the income exceeds basic limit, this particular section relating to audit would apply. For a partnership firm, interest and remuneration, the presumptive income includes, after claiming interest and remuneration, only presumptive income is computed in case of 44AD and ADA. For 44AE, presumptive income can be subsequently claimed after quantifying the presumptive income. Now we'll come to certain common issues available across all the 3 sections based on the reported judgments. Now, section says this minimum income to be offered. It does not say or does not prohibit offering higher sum. Therefore, one school of thought goes to say, I will offer the minimum because section says, or such higher sum claimed to have been earned by the SC. If I don't claim I've earned, I am not required to offer. I'm not claiming that I've offered, I've earned more, therefore I'll offer income. Nothing prohibits the SSC to offer. Section says only the minimum. But if the SSC has actually earned more income, and there are evidences to suggest the SSC has earned more income, and the SSC says section demanded me to offer only the minimum income, I've offered minimum income, and I'm otherwise entitled to take for my source the actual income earned by me, then that's going to be a suicidal attempt. If the SSC has actually earned more income, he is duty bound to offer the actual income earned. Otherwise, in some point in time, the SSC may land into trouble if there are evidences to suggest he has earned more income. Then one of the cases where there was a survey for a doctor case, and in that survey, it was identified that the income was underreported based on the evidences gathered during the course of survey. So the statement recorded after pinpointing the evidences found in the clinic, there was suppression of gross receipts. The assessee agreed that he would offer current year income. Another piece of evidence went on to say he has purchased a piece of land with an on-money paid for a couple of lakhs. Let us say, for example, 1 crore rupees. He said this is only arising out of my professional income, and I'm not very sure in which year how much I want, but it is only from my professional income which I have given for the purpose of acquiring this property. And he has agreed to offer that as current year income, and he paid tax. Now, having filed return, the case picked up for scrutiny because the surveyor, being a surveyor, as a policy, it will be picked up for scrutiny. Case is picked up for scrutiny. Now the officer says the incremental income we have offered based on the evidences gathered during the course of survey is a current year professional income. You pay tax, fine, no problem. But when it comes to the income you have earned and invested in the land purchased, the amount of 1 crore rupees, if we consider, it is disproportionate to your ability of earning current year income. Because in the past and in the current year, whatever income you want, add this 1 crore to this doesn't seem to be earned in the current year. So to that extent, we will say this portion of the income is not coming from current year. Then it could be professional income of yesteryear, but as an officer, this is not earned in the current year income. Out of the current year income, it is invested. Source is remaining now unexplained. Therefore, this much income could not have come from your current year professional income. Therefore, to this extent, I'll recharacterize this income from regular profession to undisclosed income, unexplained investment under 69 series. Therefore, I will invoke section 115 BBE. in spite of income being already offered under 44 ADA in the past years, and in the current year, by showing more income to match this investment, the assessee is visited with 115 BBE and now is in appeal. So therefore, it is advisable to offer the actual income. There are evidences to suggest that the assessee actually saved income. Otherwise, it would put the assessee in trouble at a later point in time. Now, next controversy is about application of Section 68. Many times, the department would take the bank statement of these assessees coming under presumptive provisions, verify, and see there are entries to suggest the assessee has deposited lump sum periodically, sums occasionally, etc. And they would ask the assessee to prove, and the assessee sometimes may not be able to prove, in which case the department would go to say, we will invoke Section 68. Now, in order to trigger Section 68, fundamentally, there must be books of account in which the entry was found credited. When the assessee under these presumptive provisions are not required to maintain the books of account, then the entries are not found credited in the books of account to which Section 68 would apply. And therefore, effectively, Section 68 would not apply at all in cases where there are entries found in the bank statement. There are sometimes argument by the revenue to say bank statement is nothing but the statement or the accounting on behalf of the assessee, but the rulings went on to say this cannot be presumed to be books of account of the assessee, and therefore where there is no entry in the books of account of the assessee, there will not be application of Section 68. The officer uses the Section 68 for making addition, it would fail, and number of judgments went on to say Section 68 would not apply to the amount found deposited in the bank account. Now, instead of 68, if they move to 69 series, 69A or AB, etc., then what would be the scenario? Now, one has to make the case a little stronger by seeing the facts and circumstances of the case. Now, first let us see a set of cases where the deposit made in the bank account is less than the total gross receipts offered by the SEC in the gross receipt column of the return. Gross receipt offered from the presumptive income, let us say 70 lakh rupees. Total deposit made in the bank is only 55 lakhs or 60 lakhs. And there is no doubt about the business carried on by SE or a profession carried on by SE. There is no doubt about the existence of the business. These 10 conditions are satisfied. Now, this is one set of facts. The courts have seen that the assessing officer did not doubt about the existence of the business, and the bank account collections, either cash deposit or instrument deposit, is less than the gross receipts offered. In that case, can the officer say, prove this credit, otherwise I'll invoke 69 or 69A. Whether the assessee is obligated to prove each of the credits, whether assessee is obligated to prove each of the amount deposited day-wise, or whether each of the credit he has to say it has nexus to my business, or whether the assessee is duty bound to say this is the credit is something which relevant to my business, whether assessee is required to say so. And if there are a number of credits, a part of which officer says, I will accept this is your business credits, the rest of all I doubt that it is not relevant to your business, therefore I will invoke 69 series. Is it possible? So long as the bank account collections are less than the gross receipts and the officer does not doubt the existence of the business, then these are not permissible. The officer would not be able to invoke Section 16 or 16 and say, assessee is not required to prove each of the credit found in the bank statement, and he is not required to prove the nexus so long as he is able to demonstrate the other condition is what highlighted in all these judgments rendered till the recent month. They have categorically said, first, business is not doubted, existence of business not doubted, total collections are already reflected in the total sales. Therefore, assessee is not required to prove each and every entry in the books of account. Now, slightly different set of facts. Gross receipts offered is something less than the amount deposited in the bank account. One are those days where we will say we are coming under 44 AD or 44 AE and we have offered the income prescribed, therefore acceptance was made. Now, even in the recent past, this is sought to be inquired further. Now, in that case, how one has to take defense is the question before us. Now, gross receipt offered in the business or profession as the case may be is something less than the deposits found in the bank. And of course, business is not doubted. Existence of business is not doubted. Now for the excess, what would be the consequence? Multiple options can be explored depending on the facts and circumstances of each case. The SC can say, yeah, that excess, I am unable to reconcile, therefore I'll offer 8%, 6%, depending on the facts of the case. Can that excess be regarded, or can the entire excess be considered as unexplained deposit in the bank, and therefore the entire amount will be liable for tax by invoking section 69 or 69 and consequentially 115 BBE? Or alternatively, can the assessee surrender only 8 or 6%? Since it's a bank entry, only 6%. Or if it's cash deposited into bank account, there's a cash sundry debtor collection. Therefore, he'll offer 8% of it. Number of judgments went on to say, if the business is not doubted, the existence of business is not doubted, and the SC doesn't come out with any other explanation as to where from the money had come, which is not otherwise tax-free, then the SC is free to take that 8 or 6% route, and the entire amount should not be assessed under 115 BBE. Now, in the process of reconciling the gap between the collections and the gross receipts offered, can one take the opening balance of the cash? Absolutely yes, but in the previous year return in the columns of cash balance, if it is reflected, then that can be taken as the basis, no doubt about it. There are some cases where the assessee has evidences to suggest certain solitary credits are other than turnover. They are not part of the turnover, therefore it is not included in the turnover. Facts would only establish the fact. Some loans borrowed with confirmation letter, with the banking channel evidences, etc. If the assessee is able to demonstrate that he has got books of account to reconcile it, or the entries could be established with confirmation of creditors, cash flow statement, etc., then those, even though there are differences, that can be excluded, provided SC satisfies. Even though at the initial level there may not be acceptance, tribunals have accepted, CIT appeals have accepted that SC said this is not part of the turnover, therefore it is not included for the purpose of establishing that 8 or 6% calculation. But the SSC says there are certain advances received, which is there in the bank account, or previous year I have drawn money, that amount I am re-depositing it in the current year, therefore this is not part of my gross receipts. SC has to come up with evidences to support it. Mere statement of this may not be sufficient. He has to establish subsequent events or prior year events to support that he has drawn money that has been introduced, failing which these explanations may not find favor and the results may not be so favorable to SSC. These judgments all would highlight the principles what we have few minutes back discussed in the preceding slide. Deposits in the bank account not disclosed in ITR. And very interestingly, the bank account itself is not disclosed in the ITR. There are a number of bank accounts we have to say, but one bank account itself is not there. After that, only department comes to know the existence of the bank account. During the course of the hearing, SSC says, yes, there is a bank account. There are some collections in the bank account, but that bank account itself is not there in the ITR. Fine. That by itself will not lead to a negative inference. But the credit in the bank account has no nexus with the business. Factually, if it is digged, then it has no nexus in the business. Then 115 BBE with reference to that credit in the bank account can happen. That's possible. But SC has to say, if the credit has relevance, then he can say, I'll take the 8 or 6% route. If the credit has no nexus to business, then it is difficult. If the existence of business itself is doubted by the assessing officer, then SSC has to come up with some evidences to suggest that he is in the business. Merely saying that I am not required to maintain books of account, no evidence is required, sale bill is not there, purchase bills are not required to be maintained, I have gone under presumptive provisions, will definitely lead to litigation. At a later level, one will be able to get out, but definitely it will lead to litigation. When the assessing officer doubts the very existence of the business, assess duty has to prove that he is in the business. But there is a difference between what is shown in the return of income as turnover and the collections of the bank statement. And if the SC is able to demonstrate that there is a difference is reconcilable, fine. Otherwise, SC can say, I'll offer 8 or 6%, depending on the way it is presented. Now, few other issues to say, after having accepted that there are businesses falling under presumptive provisions, can the officer further go to say that prove your creditor found in your ITR, sundry creditors, give the breakup of the creditor, prove that creditor is really outstanding and confirmation of balance required. Can the officer demand for it? Having accepted the return income under 44 AD ADAE, asking the SC to again provide confirmation of creditors or so the source for the deposits outstanding, debtors balance outstanding, etc. is not permissible once the SSC has come under 44 AD. Now, few other issues where the tribunals have encountered to say, the officer said you have offered only 8%. Now you prove that you have actually invested, you have spent 80 to 92% balance. Can the assessee be compelled to or required to demonstrate that the balance all spent? This is where there are 3 judgments. We have Bangalore Tribunal, ITIT Cochin and ITIT Delhi to say this is a presumptive provision to remove the clutches of maintaining books, proving things, etc. If again you say the SC has to demonstrate he has actually spent 92% to earn this 8% balance, then the purpose of introducing the presumptive provision does not make any sense and doesn't get achieved. And therefore, SC is not required to prove that the entire balance 92% or 94% was actually spent. But however, better to have the cash flow statement to demonstrate that current year income offered and current year investment, there is adequate source to link this so that one would not land up in trouble tomorrow because of having income invested outside the books and of course not out of known source of income. And there are instances where the assessee was asked to prove the expenses incurred, cash out, found on the date of survey, source for the cash, etc., or ad hoc disallowances made, where the tribunals went on to say so long as the assessee takes the income under 44 AD, ADA or AE, these burdens are not required to be discharged by the assessee because they are all included and embedded in the presumptive income covered. Now coming to the expense part of it, having accepted the income under 44 AD series, can the officer say further that I'll disallow expenditure by invoking section 38? Answer is no. Can the officer say, I will presume that your unabsorbed depreciation is given effect to while computing this income, or your business loss is already given effect to and balance only is what you have offered? Now coming to business loss, it is discussed in brought forward business loss discussed in 72.2. That will be kept away and continue to be carried forward. Coming to unabsorbed depreciation, we have some difficulty because 32 subsection 1 deals with current depreciation. 32 subsection 2 deals with unabsorbed depreciation. Section 30 to 38 deemed to be given effect to in full. Therefore, one school of thought go to say 32.2 is also given effect to. When you compute your income under presumptive provision, all your unabsorbed depreciation is already taken care of. There is nothing to carry forward. One school of thought comes up, but I personally feel it requires to be reconsidered. Before giving effect to 32.2, we will have to give effect to 72.2. When 72.2 is carved out, and that is not included, necessarily 32.2 also should not be given effect to. For the purpose of ascertaining the presumptive income, we should only consider the current depreciation is deemed to be given effect to. But of course, this one judgment which needs to be properly presented at a later stage. Then 40A3, by referring to the evidences found, can there be a disallowance under 40A3? Answer would be no. Can there be 40A1A? Answer is no. That is deemed to be inbuilt. There cannot be a fresh disallowance under 40A1A once the income is computed under presumptive provisions, 44 AD, etc. Can there be 43B disallowance? There are evidences to suggest that the SC has incurred expenditure which are coming under that 43B clause A to F. Now G, railway use of railway assets as well. And they are found outstanding till the date of filing, till the due date of filing return. Can there be disallowance under 43B? Now, interestingly, when we concluded that 40A3 is not available and 38 not available and 40A1A not available, we take a view that notwithstanding anything contained in section 28.2, 43. See, that's how we take the clue that none of these artificial disallowances can be subsequently made having quantified the presumptive income, because presumptive income is after giving effect to everything. There cannot be fresh. But of course, IDIT Panaji went on to say that 43B starts with a non-substantive provision even to override 44 AD, ADA, ADE. Therefore, disallowance under 43B can still be possible after quantifying the presumptive income because of the explicit non-substantive provision having overriding impact over the business chapter. Therefore, 43B will have overriding impact over these other artificial disallowances. Now, coming to share trading business, of course, Sharmaji also mentioned, it will fall under 44 AD, no doubt about it. Coming to quantification, our institute guidance note will have a play to say how to quantify it. In real life scenario, after quantifying it, whether we would be able to offer the minimum prescribed percentage, in many of the cases, we will have difficulty in offering that minimum prescribed percentage. Now, if the SSE right from inception has turnover either exceeding the limit of 1 crore and availed 44 AB clause A, or 1 to 10 crore now because everything goes only through banking channel, therefore up to 10 crore no problem, over about 10 crore only he has gone under audit. Previously never availed 44 AD at all in the past, then he can always go with his book results, no problem at all. But knowingly or unknowingly in the previous years he has availed the 44 AD subsection 1 and now subsequently is unable to offer the minimum threshold 8 or 6%. For even all these sort of derivative business, etc., books of account need to be maintained, get the accounts audited, and in the event that he is unable to do so, penal consequences will follow. But now in this case, where the SSE did not maintain the books, get the accounts audited, but filed a loss return. Now the officer said, your presumptive income, you have not offered the minimum presumptive income, therefore I'll escalate the income to the minimum prescribed level, where the tribunal said the officer can initiate penal proceeding for not complying the provisions of 44 AD audit provisions, but for that reason, assessing officer cannot escalate the income to the higher level because the SC did not carry on the audit, which is what in the previous 44 AE also ruling went on to say. Here also the same ruling goes. Now, how much is available source for investment? Whatever income we have offered plus the depreciation, because depreciation is a non-cash expenditure. So the income offered plus depreciation can be taken as a cash source for making investment, subject to evidences available to see movement of inventory, debtors and creditors. We will be able to reconcile and say this is the amount which is available for investment, and that much. Denying the depreciation for the purpose of source is not acceptable. That is definitely to be accepted. And over and above there are investments, better to reconcile and offer it. Otherwise, later on, the SSE may land into difficulty. TDS provisions, Finance Act 20 says above 1 crore cases, we will have to necessarily deduct tax, etc. in all those 5 individual cases and HUF cases. Other cases, TDS will apply. Non-deduction of tax at source may result in penal consequences in TDS provisions, but that by itself will not lead to incremental addition added to the income presumptively offered by invoking 40A, 1A, etc. And can the SSE be visited with penal consequences under section 269 SST when the SSE claims he has not maintained books of account? For the purpose of 269 SSRT, maintenance of books is not the criteria. Event is the criteria. For the purpose of 68, we can say maintenance of books is necessary. For section 269 SST, maintenance of books is not the criteria. There are adequate evidences to suggest that the SC has violated section 269 SST, even though SC has not maintained books of account, one would not be able to spare the position of inviting 271D, DAE, and of course, reasonable cause can be adduced subject to other facts establishing the need to follow the law or not able to follow the law. Non-maintenance of books may result in inviting penalty under 271A. Not getting the accounts audited may invite penalty under 271B. And both will not be possible because when the SC claims he has not maintained books of account, expecting him to get the accounts audited, not possible. So therefore, one can say, if both are not complied with, penalty under 271A to the extent of 25,000 only possible. Penal consequences under 271B may not be possible. That's how the tribunal judgments went on to say. But technically, how to get over 139.9 is a matter which we'll have to see in the days to come. And of course, as I said, representations were made. We'll have to wait and see how this is going to take up its shape. This is all I would like to share from my side on the recent developments on the controversies relating to 44 AD, ADE, AE. And if there are a few more points which we would like to take up for our discussion, subject to organizers providing time, I'm free to share my thoughts. Thank you one and all for your patient listening. Thank you. Thanks organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my thought. And it's really a pleasure for me to be amongst you this morning to share all the thought. And thank you.
Excuse me, for F&O transaction, what did you say? Can you elaborate, please? As I said, for profit and loss, you have to take for tax audit purpose. But yes, whether 6% or 8% of that amount can be taken, or we have to offer the full amount?
Sarbaji, now if we say for turnover, we are ignoring the sign and we arrive at. If the actual evidence suggests that they've earned more than 6 or 8%, just offering 8 or 6%, technically one can say, yes, I'll go under this provision. But if the actual revenue earned is more and it is established that he has got that money lying in the bank account, definitely it is advisable to offer the actual income. Going by that 6 or 8% route will definitely later on land up the assessee in trouble. Therefore, one has to go by actual income earned. There are withdrawals to suggest he has expended, etc. And then it's okay. Otherwise, when physically the amount is lying in his bank account, he has got revenue lying in the bank account, we will have to see that much definitely assay has to offer.
So, or such higher amount, so that general proposition that applies to F&O also, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. No, only there that argument they said as claimed by the SSC, but I don't subscribe to that view. Okay, you can just say you have claimed 6% and 8% only, when your actual results show, your bank deposit in bank account show that there is a higher amount. If there is a F&O loss, then what happens?
No, then it is going to be less than 8 or 6%. Therefore, maintain the books, get the accounts audited.
Okay. But then the taxable in, suppose that is the only loss and that is the only total income.
Then the income is going to be less than basic limit.
Yeah.
Then there is no audit required, provided other conditions of 4 and 5 applies.
Right. This Niranjan Jain is on F&O transaction. Niranjan Jain, you have cited. You have details about that, facts of that case?
There the assessing officer escalated income to 8% of the turnover when the assessee reported loss. Then the tribunal said the officer has not a right to increase the income to the presumptive income merely because the assessee did not maintain books and did not get the accounts audited. The assessing officer can say you did not maintain books and did not get the accounts audited, therefore you are visited with penalty. That doesn't give the power to the assessing officer to escalate the income to the presumptive number. The assessing officer has to accept the loss, but he can initiate 271A or B as the case may be. This is what the judgment went on to say.
Okay. Yes, any other question, friends?
There is one query in the chat box to say how to report F&O loss in case of non-resident individual, tax audit mandatory. Tax audit, now leaving alone 44 AD, it's applicable only to a resident assessee, and therefore for non-resident assessee, 44 AD would not apply. We'll go with regular records, and depending on the 44 AB threshold, whether books to be maintained or not to be maintained, books to be maintained, whether audit required or not to be audited, depending on the turnover criteria. And with book results, we will file the relevant ITR applicable for the SSC.